on Goblin Reddit. Today's story is...
My grandfather swore never to speak to me again because of my marriage. 20 years later, he called me in tears, but he was hiding a dark secret that revealed his true nature. 20 years ago, the grandparents who raised me decided to eliminate me from their life completely. For what reason? They did not consider my choice of husband to be suitable. In their view, he did not have the right social standing, nor did he deserve to bear their family name. Many people do not have grandparents who have a significant influence on their lives, but in my case, they represented my entire family. When I was 7 years old, I lost my parents in a tragic plane crash, and my grandparents took me into their care. For this, I am somewhat grateful to them, I suppose. They were not obliged to take responsibility for a small child, considering their advanced age, but they did so. Instead of ending up in adoption or temporary homes, at least I had a stable home and people who, in their own way, provided me with protection and something similar to affection. I grew up in a house where my basic needs were never lacking, even if that was the only thing. However, gratitude does not erase the experiences lived under their roof. Although they provided me with care, I also suffered a lot of psychological pressure due to their authoritarian methods. My grandparents, who were extremely traditional, had inflexible ideas about the correct way of living. Their deep religiosity demanded that I follow their beliefs without question. This situation contrasted greatly with the upbringing I received from my parents during my early years. My parents, while they were alive, had a more relaxed and open-minded attitude. They never forced me to follow strict religious doctrines. But with my grandparents, it was exactly the opposite. They established numerous non-negotiable rules that were not optional. My grandfather in particular ran the house like a military barracks. His past in the army was clearly reflected in his attitude and treatment of others. Instead of asking for things, he would shout orders. He demanded absolute obedience and discipline from everyone, including my grandmother. In many respects, she largely put up with his domineering nature. She had to take care of cooking, cleaning, and all the household chores without help, even when she was exhausted or ill. From an early age, I noticed the imbalance in their relationship. As I grew older, living with my grandparents became even more restrictive. I could not be an ordinary child under any circumstances. While other children my age played, made friends, or enjoyed simple pleasures, I was forbidden most of these activities. For example, I could not wear skirts, dresses, or sleeveless blouses. They considered these garments inappropriate, almost indecent, because they didn't want me to show my arms. My hair always had to be braided, no exceptions. Loose hair, which they called rebellious, was unacceptable in their home. My appearance had to constantly conform to their strict rules of modesty and discipline. It didn't matter that I was just a girl wanting to dress like my peers or try a new hairstyle. Everything about my appearance and behavior was dictated by their so-called rules. And it didn't end there. After school, while other children could spend time with friends or stay on to take part in extracurricular activities, I had to go straight home, with no detours or excuses. Once there, I was expected to pray and start my homework. My grandfather would religiously inspect my backpack every night, and if he discovered any bad grades on any work, he would deny me dinner, sending me to sleep hungry. My room had to be spotless at all times, without the slightest trace of dust. If they found anything out of place, no matter how insignificant, as well as scolding me, they would give me 10 slaps on the palms of my hands. I still remember the pain and my tears every time, but they didn't care at all. Nor were I allowed to have friends without their prior approval, and as you can imagine, their criteria for approval was practically impossible to meet. If they disliked someone's family background or even their tone of voice, they would forbid that friendship immediately. As if all this were not enough, my grandfather held the old-fashioned belief that women should not learn to drive. So when I turned 16 and wanted to drive like everyone else, he not only discouraged me, he forbade it completely. According to him, women and engines were a terrible combination, and any desire I had to get behind the wheel was dismissed as foolish. Looking back, it seems incredible how much I suffered. At the time, however, I accepted everything because I had no alternatives. That was my life, the only one I knew. I had nowhere else to go, no one else to turn to. His house was my whole world, and he convinced me that his rules were normal, that that's how all families worked. It was only when I started university that I began to see things differently. Even getting there was an uphill battle, though. My grandfather was strongly opposed. In his mind, I had no need for higher education. He thought my time would be better spent marrying the son of one of his close friends. He had it all planned out, as if my life were a chess piece that he could move around at will. But I couldn't accept it. Deep down, I knew I longed for something more for myself. So I cried. I begged him to let me study for a university degree. It wasn't easy, it involved a lot of pleading, but he finally gave in. When I arrived at university, I experienced a taste of freedom for the first time and began to glimpse how life could be different. When I met my current husband there, I was honestly surprised that someone like him wanted to talk to me. I had spent my whole life in such a controlled and suffocating environment that I didn't know how to relate to people my own age. I was socially awkward, introverted, and insecure. I didn't know how to make friends or have informal conversations without constantly doubting what I had to say. But he made everything easier. From the start, he made me feel comfortable, as if I didn't need to pretend to be someone different. We started out as friends. Gradually, we got to know each other better until we started going out formally. The experience was very positive, with no awkward moments. I can honestly say that I was lucky to find him because he transformed my life in unimaginable ways. Meeting his family was also revealing. I didn't know what to expect, but from the moment I entered their home, they showed such warmth and hospitality. It was the opposite of what I was used to. No shouting, harsh words, or inflexible rules from his parents. I hadn't understood that a family could function like that, because my experience with my grandparents had been completely different. Over time, his family made me feel part of them. Throughout university, I kept my relationship with my boyfriend a secret from my grandparents. I anticipated how they would react to finding out that I was dating someone. They didn't want me to get involved with anyone, just to study. For them, my future was already decided. I was supposed to marry the son of my grandfather's friend, and any deviation was unacceptable. It was when I graduated and got a good job that I finally found the courage to confront my grandparents. It was one of the most difficult situations I have ever faced. When I expressed to them my desire for a different life, chosen by me, they reacted exactly as I feared. My grandfather, in particular, flew into a rage. He accused me of deceiving him, using university as an escape from his control. He said he felt surprised and betrayed, as if I had been plotting against him all along. My grandmother also showed deep disappointment. She begged me to come back and live under her roof and her rules again. Her main argument was that I was angering God by going against his wishes. She truly believed that by refusing to marry the man they had chosen for me, I was risking not only my happiness, but also my soul. I ignored her opinions and followed my own path, the one I wanted for myself. My husband and I continued together, strengthening our bond every day, and a few years after starting our relationship, he proposed to me. Naturally, my grandparents interpreted this as another opportunity to express their disapproval. On hearing about the engagement, they invited me to lunch. Anyone who thinks they were seeking to reconcile and accept my fiancé is very much mistaken. I was too, because that lunch turned out to be anything but friendly. The meeting quickly turned into a session of verbal abuse and emotional manipulation. It didn't take them long to express their disappointment in me. My grandfather, in particular, didn't hold back in expressing his thoughts. He said that my parents would be ashamed of the person I had become, trying to make me feel guilty in order to break off my engagement. According to them, my fiancé was not up to scratch. From their perspective, I was wasting a great opportunity by refusing to marry the man they considered appropriate, who was better off financially. I didn't care about his wealth, as my partner was my companion in every sense, but none of this meant anything to my grandparents. The only thing that seemed relevant was that my future husband did not come from a prestigious family, and they had always dreamed that their only granddaughter would marry someone wealthy. For them, it all came down to status and money. Love took a backseat to wealth and appearances. My grandfather made it clear that if I did indeed marry my chosen one, he would be forced to eliminate me from their lives for good. He expressed it as if I were forcing them to make that decision, as if I had no alternatives. Well, I could have accepted my fiancé, but that would never happen. He said that by marrying him, I was condemning myself to a miserable existence. That would be living with my grandparents on their terms. He was trying to scare me, to make me doubt my decision, but he achieved exactly the opposite. The truth is that I had already heard enough criticism and endured their judgments for too long. I knew the life I longed for and what they could offer me. My partner had shown me the meaning of true love and support, and I would not give that up. If cutting me off from their lives was their decision, I would accept the consequences. So I went ahead with my marriage, a choice that I can safely say I have never regretted. Not for a moment. I'm not suggesting that marriage has been easy, but it has definitely been much better than living with my grandparents or what I would have experienced if I had married the son of one of their friends. Whether the times were difficult or happy, we have always supported each other, and every morning I still wake up grateful for the love we share. Now we are a family of 4, with 2 wonderful children who reinforce my conviction about that decision I made a long time ago. 20 years have passed since my last conversation with my grandparents. They decided to completely eliminate me from their lives, as if I had never existed. According to some distant relatives, they don't even mention my name and act as if I had never been part of their family. Everything until this week, when something unexpected happened. A distant cousin, with whom I occasionally keep in touch, called me to share some information. She told me that my grandfather had contacted her asking for my phone number so he could get in touch. After 20 years of excluding me from their lives, this aroused my suspicions. My cousin shared this concern. She warned me about the situation because she had already given them my number and wanted to prepare me in case there was some ulterior motive. She didn't even consult me before sharing my details. I didn't hold out any hope that they would have changed after so long. They wouldn't have suddenly transformed into liberal people without strict rules. My grandfather detests any such behavior, and at his age, I doubt he has undergone any transformation. Yesterday, finally, I received a call from my grandfather. 20 years had passed since our last conversation. I noticed his discomfort, as if he didn't know how to talk to me after so long, so we exchanged small talk at first. I didn't know how to start a conversation with someone who had been absent from my life for 2 decades either. I told him about my current situation, my husband, and our 2 children. He showed interest for the first time in my partner, and now also in my children, while I was mentioning these details. But I sensed that this conversation had a specific objective, and I wanted to find out what it was. I asked him directly why he had called after so long, reminding him that as far as I could remember, they had completely erased me from their lives. I reminded him that I was still happily married to the man they had rejected so much, so nothing had changed in that respect. The same man they considered unsuitable for me. Then my grandfather began his explanation. He said that both he and my grandmother were getting old, and they simply wanted to reconnect with me before it was too late, to reconcile and overcome old grievances. He admitted that he regretted cutting ties so long ago, but being too stubborn to admit it, he had never summoned up the necessary courage. And that he had missed me. Honestly, when my grandfather mentioned having missed me, something seemed strange to me. My intuition warned me that something was wrong. My grandfather never talks about feelings. Growing up, I don't remember a single occasion when he expressed emotions like missing someone. For a while, I used to joke about him being like a robot. He always had a stoic, authoritarian, and distant attitude. He didn't even miss his own parents. That he would suddenly use such emotive language seemed completely alien to his personality. Could it be that he had suffered an accident that radically transformed his character? I doubt it very much. Nor does it make sense that he should miss me now, after 20 years without even sending a message on my birthday or at Christmas. For 20 years he never showed any interest in me, and now he misses me? My grandfather went on to express his wish that I, together with my children, visit both him and my grandmother, spending time together. But when I asked if my husband could join us, he replied categorically that he would prefer that man not to attend, making it clear that my husband was still not welcome in his home, just me and the children. With that comment, I confirmed that he had hardly changed. My children are not exclusively mine. They are part of the life shared with my husband. The idea of welcoming my children while excluding the man who helped create them and has loved and supported me for years made no sense at all. It was an insult not only to my husband, but also to me. My partner is as much a fundamental part of my life as my children, and any attempt to ignore or exclude him constitutes an attack on our entire family. I told my grandfather directly that if he genuinely wanted to reconnect with us, he should abandon those conditions and restrictions. That is to say, eliminate any absurd rules. If he couldn't accept that, it was impossible for my children or me to want to be part of his life again. I explained that my husband is my inseparable partner in every respect. I refuse to allow anyone into my life without respecting and including them, regardless of the family connection. That's just how I am. And just as my grandparents have rules and standards, that is my requirement for anyone who wishes to participate in my life. My words infuriated my grandfather. He exploded in anger and began to rant, claiming that I was trying to force him to appreciate my husband unnecessarily. He argued that my children and I were his family, making it reasonable to maintain contact exclusively with us, implying that this relationship could completely do without my husband. From his perspective, my partner did not need to get involved to allow him to reconnect with us. At that point, I had had enough. First, he contacted me after all this time, making a poor attempt at reconciliation, continuing his attempts at control as always. Second, he acted as he always did, demanding my compliance regardless of my opinion, not allowing any contradiction. So I told my grandfather that our conversation was over and that I did not intend to keep in touch with him. I am not willing to give in to his demands. If he wants to repair our relationship, he will have to make a sincere effort. No more impositions, because I am no longer a child willing to please them. Since then, my grandfather has been repeatedly calling and leaving voice messages, but I don't answer his calls. Fortunately, he doesn't use text messages, which helps. I don't consider myself to be the villain in this situation, but I would like to hear other opinions. Update 1. Everyone agrees with me about the suspicions towards my grandfather. My intuition suggests that something doesn't add up with his sudden desire for reconnection, and everyone supports this perception. He is an extremely toxic man, and I find it hard to believe that after 20 years of silence, he suddenly missed me and regretted having pushed me away. There is a strong possibility that there is an ulterior motive, and I cannot ignore that feeling. At the same time, I want to be fair and acknowledge the small possibility that I am wrong. If their intentions are genuine, if they truly regret their actions and seek reconciliation, then I could consider allowing my children to get to know them. However, there is one non-negotiable point. If my grandparents wish to have a relationship with my children, they must also accept and respect my husband. Allowing them to become involved in our lives while excluding my partner would send the wrong message, not only to him, but also to my children. I refuse to model such behavior in front of them. However, if by some coincidence my grandparents are willing to take responsibility for the past and reach a compromise, then I will consider gradually moving forward to rebuild the relationship. This does not imply forgetting the damage caused or acting recklessly. It means setting clear boundaries and moving forward only if I feel comfortable with it for myself and my family. Update 2. 2 weeks have passed since my last update, and I can confirm, although it was unnecessary, that our suspicions were correct. I have just heard some alarming news. My grandmother has fallen seriously ill. She has been hospitalized and diagnosed with kidney failure. She is receiving dialysis and urgently needs a kidney transplant. It turns out that she and my grandfather have been trying to contact me because I am their only granddaughter, and consequently, my children are their great-grandchildren. They need to verify if any of us could be compatible for the kidney transplant she requires. I found out about my grandmother's condition from some distant relatives who recently visited her in hospital. According to them, she is very weak and seriously ill. Clearly, she is in a critical condition. As I understand it, this explains my grandfather's desperation to reconnect with me. The urgency in his calls makes sense now. She has been pushing hard for me to visit, probably with the ulterior motive of suggesting that we undergo compatibility tests. She is clearly looking to determine whether we could donate a kidney to her. Having been made fully aware of the situation, I honestly feel furious and outraged. On the one hand, I feel compassion for my grandmother's health condition, but at the same time I continue to process our history and my own feelings of betrayal. How dare my grandparents assume that they can simply turn to me and my children, expecting us to be their salvation because they need a transplant? After 20 years of silence and toxic behavior, do they suddenly expect us to drop everything and offer something as valuable as an organ? How can they assume that we would even want to help them? They didn't care about maintaining a relationship with me, my husband, or my children all this time, and now, facing a crisis, they suddenly consider it acceptable to return to our lives as if nothing had happened? Their nerve is outrageous. What's worse is that I consider my grandfather a pathetic man, incapable of overcoming his hatred of my husband even to save his wife. It wouldn't have worked, but at least we would have agreed to meet with him. But even that he can't do properly. Update 3. A week has passed since my last statement. My grandfather contacted me again. This time, I informed him that I knew exactly the situation with my grandmother, and that neither my children nor I had any interest in helping them. I suggested that he seek assistance from other relatives willing to help. That was when my grandfather started attacking me. He said things like I had ruined my life by marrying my husband, and how I had made a serious mistake by joining with a man outside our religion. He made it unequivocally clear to me that if I had married someone of the same faith, he would never have excluded me from his life. This moment revealed everything to me. Over the years, I had wondered why my grandfather rejected my husband, showed so much resentment, and disqualified him, even though he had never acted incorrectly. I finally understood the truth. It all came down to religious differences. When I realized this, my indignation towards my grandfather increased. I firmly told him that I was ashamed of even being related to someone like that. An individual so blinded by his hatred of another person based solely on religious beliefs could never participate in my life or be close to my children. I told him that I would never forgive his words, his treatment of me, my husband, and my children, all because of something as absurd and hateful as his intolerance. I couldn't believe that I had always held out some hope of eventual change, but now, hearing directly about his manifest ignorance, I understood that there was no possibility of reconciliation. Then my grandfather tried to change his strategy. He began by suggesting that, even if he disliked my husband, he should at least consider helping my grandmother, who was ill and needed our support. He tried to manipulate my emotions, claiming that I owed it to him since he and my grandmother took me in after my parents died and raised me. Then I reminded him that living with them was far from being a pleasant experience. I had already paid enough suffering under his roof for years. I followed all his rules, and yet I received his punishment just for marrying someone outside his religion. I told my grandfather that, although I regretted their current situation, that did not make me responsible for helping them. After all, in his own words, we were no longer family. My grandfather started to curse at me, a behavior not very in line with his supposed religious values, but I ignored the old man. I ended the call and blocked his number. I couldn't bear to keep listening to his toxic and manipulative words. He had clearly stated his opinions, finally revealing his true nature to me. I will not allow such a person to enter the life of my family, especially to establish contact with my children. I'm beginning to suspect that he doesn't even really care about my grandmother. He's simply afraid of losing someone who serves his purposes, and that motivates his insistence. I don't intend to defend my grandmother, as she also mistreated me, both directly and by not protecting me from my grandfather, but in this case she is also a victim. At least relatively speaking, if that makes any sense. Update 4. I have been asked for an update on my story, particularly regarding my grandmother, so I will share what has happened over the last few months. My grandmother finally passed away due to her kidney disease. She was on the waiting list but never received the necessary organ. In any case, she was already an elderly woman, and her kidneys were not her only health problem. At least with dialysis sessions, she could have survived longer. For those who said I shouldn't have let my grandmother die or wished her dead, I have some clarification. First, I never wished anyone dead. I don't understand where in my story I expressed such a thing. They are probably people who read Reddit superficially and make up details to save time. Regarding saving her, I consulted with my eldest son, who, being of legal age, could donate, but he said he did not wish to donate an organ to someone unknown to him. I could not force him to undergo surgery for someone he never wanted to be part of his life. In my case, I did not wish to do so either, even though I was compatible. The argument that she is also a victim is partially true. Did my grandfather control her the same way he did me? Indeed. But he also acted cruelly towards me and fully supported my grandfather's plans for my life. I can't say she was a good person either. I didn't know her before her relationship with my grandfather. I don't know what she was really like, so I can only judge based on what I observed during my years with her. And my grandfather has lost his assistant, who kept him alive, so now he has been admitted to a residence for veterans. In addition to lacking someone to attend to his needs, his recent deterioration has been remarkable. He is showing the initial signs of Alzheimer's, in addition to problems typical of his advanced age. He has no immediate family members who can take care of him. One of his nephews took charge of admitting him there after visiting him and finding the home in deplorable conditions. Don't expect any more updates, as I believe that the whole conflict generated by my grandfather has definitely come to an end. I doubt that he will be able to take any further action considering his current state and residence.